How's it, guys? Like we said, we're going to be here as soon as the president's speech is done. Glad we gave him that opportunity. Thank you for being patient with us. We didn't want to interrupt or rob anybody of the opportunity to get that information. I was watching it on the side there. I'll go through it again later to get all bits and pieces that I want to get out of it. So what we've got tonight, we've had a few requests over the last, I would say, or since we started. Every now and again we start and we bring up RF in our discussions. And, I've had a couple of guys ask questions about RF and then people asking us to do sessions specifically on RF. I watched a session, or I joined a Zoom session the other day where MJ was talking. So I invited MJ from RF Junkies to come and join us tonight, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion. We're going to try and keep it at like standard grade for people like me to understand. And then we'll take it from there and we'll enjoy the conversation. If you've got questions, please post them. We're going to try and answer as many as we can. And then we'll take the discussions as it gets steered by you guys. So how's it, MJ?
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. Thanks for hanging around. Thanks for joining us. I think it's
Thank
a great.
you for the invite.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. I think we've had some really good questions and scenarios where people have been asking, specifically RF. RF is almost like it's like one of those invisible things that you know about and you hear about, and your grandmother spoke about it, but you don't really know what's going on. Even in today's technology, the requirement to have specialists like yourself, especially on the large formats. I can speak for myself. When we do DVD recordings or broadcasts or any large scale events, one of the first crew members that we book is MJ, and he's worked into our budget. And before he even knows, we just give him a date and we book him, and then the event builds around there. And some of them are really complex. Some of them are actually manageable by our guys, but having someone dedicated takes the stress off, takes the burden off. I mean, I can go to front of house like we did 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago in Pretoria, and I don't even have to worry about RF. And then none of the artists on stage are moaning about anything. It just works. If someone's got an issue in the way that it even interacts with the artists, they know that there's someone looking after them in terms of dropout in their ears, microphone. They know where to find their mic. They're being cleaned by the alcohol wipes. It's great. This was before lockdown. But it's, from my perspective, just a nice, it's a very reassuring crew member that knows what he's doing, confident in what he's doing. I don't have to explain the job to him. I'm very proud to say that I've known MJ now for 12 years.
Long time.
12 years?
Yeah.
13 years? 12 years? Somewhere there?
Since about 11, 12 years.
Yeah,
There.
since you were a student. And I don't think you spoke to me for the first 6 years that I knew you. You're a very quiet person.
Yeah.
And now I'm forcing you to speak, so you can't hold that against me. But it's been a great, for me, a great opportunity to see you grow into your talent, find something that you're passionate about, and actually grow a business out of it. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, just starting your own business and taking it from that perspective. But when we speak about RF, I just want to lead the conversation, then I'm going to give it over to you. Obviously, at the high end, if you want to call it that, you've got your gear, you've got your scanners, you come in, you pack out. Most people see you with like your 65 screens that you put up, and they don't really get what you're doing, and you're in your element there, and it works, and the results are there. On some events where you've been, there's been real issues with whether it be lead or outside interference or something like that, or the shape of the set on some of the TV shows where you've had to get creative with antennas and all that. And if we go back 10, 12 years, lead wasn't such a big issue, but the amount of RF was a big issue. Running, I remember I was telling you earlier that we ran, me and Morris with Scospel, I think it was 2009, somewhere there, about 112 channels in the Sun City Super Bowl of RF between about 2 or 3 brands. And we had no workbench, no scanners. We used our wit, we used the knowledge we had, the experience, trial and error. We took about It did. I'll be honest. It took us about 3 days to get the RF clean, and then we had someone dedicated. Eddie Sitole was dedicated to that position, and throughout we ran about 12 shows, I think. Here and there we had to change a channel, change the thing he was scanning, but we had to manually go around and speak to all the other venues and do the labor.
Yeah.
And a little bit of hold your thumbs and hope it works. If someone came into the room, we wouldn't find what it was. We spoke to OBs and made sure that their stuff wasn't in the way. But
being friendly neighbors.
Exactly, yeah. So, and then you've got the other side of the coin, which is guys that own, a dual system or a quad or even the fixed frequency, like a GLD from Shure or the EW100s from Sennheiser, the small stubby only.
SLXs
it's not systems, it's standalones. It's an artist traveling with the mic or a small company doing a corporate with 3 or 4 mics, where Workbench or RF is only a problem when you switch on the mic and it doesn't work, or there's a swish and they just go press a scan button and carry on. They don't really pay attention to what's happening and all that, because a lot of the technology can get done within that system. So I want to keep it quite practical tonight. So I'm going to hand over to you for a bit, just so you can explain sort of where your field fits in and what are the kind of things that you've learned to focus on to give guys like me such a smooth experience.
Okay. So I started studying or self-studying about RF. I think when I started at Rema, doing sound at Rema. So I didn't quite understand what RF was. That was a couple of years back. So I knew there was a wireless mic, there was a receiver somewhere and an antenna, but I didn't know how they interlink. So I started reading service manuals and all of that, asking questions. A few years later, I understand what I'm doing. So basically, RF is just energy. It's not magic or anything. There's a current in your cable, and that current causes energy to leave. The energy that leaves your cable and goes into the air is what is the information that goes to your antenna. So that's basically the medium of how the information travels from your hand mic.
Can I interrupt you just a second? Your microphone is on your collar here, and as you're moving, it's making a noise. So just either pull the cable just a little bit away from your. There we go.
That?
There we go.
Yeah. And then from there, once you understand how the signal gets to your antenna and your receiver, you're halfway there. And then it's just setting up properly. So you need to do your planning, obviously. You need to know what you're dealing with, what equipment you're getting. For instance, when you book me for a show, if I have time, sometimes I don't tell you, I just do it anyway. If I have time and access to a venue, I'll go there and do a quick scan and just go back home.
How do you do that scan?
I do that scan with radio frequency spectrum analyzer.
Like a handheld mobile device?
Yes. So what that does is, because radio frequencies are, what do you call it? They're invisible. You can't see them. You need something that measures the energy in the air. So that energy obviously goes into your computer via a USB cable. And from there, that's when your software that calculates your frequencies comes into play. You'd export your frequencies from your scanning software and then put it into your coordination or calculation software.
So can I ask you a question then? So say if you go, say you're working for Sound GP, you know that we've got ULXD, you know what frequency range they're in. If you go to a venue, do a scan, and you find issues, in that area, how much can you navigate through that with using, for example, the Shure systems?
Yeah. It's, well, sometimes you can, it depends what frequency bandwidth the actual device can cater for. Sometimes you can fit the microphone frequencies in between whatever's there. But yeah, according to the information that your software gives you. Otherwise, if you just fit them anyway, it's gonna cause issues for you.
And okay,
If
on that same one now, how is
yeah,
that? Say, for example, we didn't have you on the gig. I get to a gig, I
yeah,
put my ULXD down, and I press
yeah,
the scan button on the quad.
yeah, yeah,
Does that unit then basically? I mean, obviously, I'm not getting that kind of feedback in terms of
yeah,
telling me where the problems is, but those frequencies that pop up as being what the unit would say available in different groups
hmm,
would be the gaps that it's found between
yes,
potential noise.
yeah. That would be the gaps, but obviously it's certain spacing from the actual frequencies that are already there. So, like if you put your frequency that you are using right next to, let's say, 1 megahertz, exactly 1 megahertz, or right next to that frequency, you can create another frequency that can be problematic for you. So you could actually be um, wasting space on your spectrum by creating other frequencies, if you get what I'm saying.
So, okay, so just explain that again. So if there's a frequency
So
and I put another one too close to it, are you talking about harmonics that's being created?
yes, that we actually call intermodulation distortion.
Okay,
I don't know if you've got a picture of that, but what happens
I
is
do. I'm going to go to a different view quickly,
okay.
and then
So
there we've got it. Okay, so it's
so
your
what
it's
hap
your blue
yeah,
graph thing.
so what happens is you have your two fundamental frequencies, which are, let's say it's two microphones. One microphone that you find there from the venue or from a surrounding area, and the second frequency is your microphone that you are going to be using on that show. Um, those two frequencies, if the spacing is not enough, can cause harmonics, which can fill up spaces in your spectrum, and then you'll have no space to actually fit in more equipment, if you
Okay,
get what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Um,
I'm gonna throw another question out here because I said I want to keep this very practical.
mm,
There's not everybody understands, and I'm thinking now on for example something like a Shure unit, you've got groups and you've got channels.
yeah,
So there's a myth out there, and some people, and I've seen them do this, but I want you to correct them. You can take group one, channel one, group two, channel two, group three, channel three, group four, channel four. Doesn't that mean I'm
no,
spacing them far apart from each other?
no. Um,
So
so
explain
the,
what does that mean?
the so that the calculations that I've been telling you about. So each group has a set of calculated frequencies that are compatible with each other
And spaced.
and spaced far enough apart or spaced it doesn't have to, it's not a how far did you space it factor. It's a calculation factor. So
to
it
to
can be
avoid
right
to
next to
avoid
it.
the intermodulation, basically.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of maths that goes into that, and that's why we have the software to help you out. So group one, if you choose group one, you need to go group one, group one, channel two, group one, channel three, just like that.
Okay.
And that's how it works. So if you go
So
group one, group two, channel two, you could be causing an issue for
because
yourself.
the groups, if you look at the groups as layers, if that's group one, channel one, two, three, four, group two
Hmm.
is probably just sitting slightly spaced.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're sitting
And
and you're causing those intermodulations
causing
now.
harmonics. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like
Yeah.
group 1 is here, group 2 is there, group 3 is
No,
there. Yeah,
it's not like that.
that's what I
No.
wanted to get to.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how it works. And if I go there, do the scan, and I see that the frequency band that your actual gear is in is filled up with a lot of things, then I'm in a better position when the setup starts, because I can tell you, let's look for equipment that's in another frequency band, because the ones that you have are gonna be in trouble once we go
So you
on
would
to
go
site.
from to a different manufacturer, basically.
Not
No.
necessarily a different manufacturer, same manufacturer, but another frequency band. So it would, on the frequency spectrum, it would actually occupy
A different space.
another location. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so that
So
answers
that's
that one.
mm,
Then the next thing, I asked this question in that other chat you were doing the other day, and I ask it on purpose because this is, again, I'm keeping it to what guys find in their workshop, and I've seen
yeah.
this specific happen often, where guys, to save space, you put a quad system in a 2U rack or a 3U rack, and you don't put the stubbies out front, you actually put them in the back, straight in the flight case.
And the stubbies are facing to the back.
They're sitting literally like this out the back of the
Oh,
unit,
okay.
but they're still
Facing
within.
the performance area.
Yes. So
Yeah.
so my question is, and I'm going to go to a picture of that. This one here. So this is when I talk about a stubby, it's basically your quarter wave omnidirectional antenna.
Yeah.
So the thing that I've seen guys do is you get the guy that do the 10 and 12, like or 10 and 2, which is the driving position, or they do a 12 and 3, or they do a 12 and 12, or they do that pointing, or they do a 45 out to the, it's an omni, so it doesn't matter, correct?
It does matter.
Okay, why?
It's an omni, yes, but it's an omni on a certain plane.
Okay.
So what happens is when that stubby is facing the performance area, when the top of that stubby is facing the performance area, it doesn't actually, that's not the effective part of the antenna.
Okay.
So the effective part of the antenna is on the actual side of the antenna. So that little
When you talk about the effective part, you're talking about the pickup pattern.
The pickup pattern, yeah.
Yeah.
So the pickup pattern on an antenna like that is like a donut. So if you're looking at a donut from the top, there's nothing in the middle.
Yes.
So there's no taste in the middle.
So pointing it at something, you're pointing a blank space,
yeah, you're
because
pointing
it's doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can't bite into thin air when you bite the donut in the middle. So the sides of that antenna is where it's most effective.
So what's the difference between the sides of that antenna when it's sitting upright or sideways? If that my performance area is there, does that make a difference?
It does. So you've got a position where the antennas are angled at a 45-degree angle. And the reason, even with your cardioid antennas, that's the case. So they face at a 45-degree angle because of what you call multipath interference, and also the way the wave comes back from a reflected surface.
Can I put that picture up?
So,
I think you did give me that picture.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
So
you got your
what
transmitter and
happens?
receiver, yeah.
Yeah. So your artist is on stage holding their mic, or they have their belt pack on their belt, and they're talking, and all of that energy is leaving the microphone. The information is leaving the microphone, some information is gonna go directly to the antenna. Some of it is gonna hit the wall, and from the wall it's gonna come back. So what happens when a frequency hits, when a sine wave hits the wall, is it dampens the amplitude, meaning it's gonna be less strength, and the actual wave turns a bit. So the angling turns a bit.
Yeah.
So when you slant your antenna at a 45-degree angle, you put it in a position where it still sees effective signal. However, the wave leaves its reflected surface.
Okay. So you're
If
giving
you
it a
get what
better
I'm saying.
chance to getting the strongest
Yeah.
potential path.
Yes. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, and it almost helps a lot better to use helical antenna, because if you use a helical antenna, then we don't all have access to a helical antenna.
I'm going to put that
But
picture up quickly. Yeah.
if you have one, so the helical antenna is that transparent one
Yes.
on the picture.
I'll just put it on now.
That's circular polarized, meaning whatever angle that sine wave comes to your antenna, it still accepts, because it's a 360 pattern that you get from that antenna.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So the angling helps. It's a bit more effective.
So let's talk, while we're in this discussion about the stubbies and stuff, let's quickly just talk about diversity. In other words, two antennas on a system, because obviously that's what we've mentioned. So yeah, you can explain it.
So diversity is actually two independent two independent antennas working on one system. So that helps when there is multipath interference. So what happens is, if we can go back to that picture again, where the frequencies are bouncing off the walls. So when you've got, let's say, 5 or 3 reflections plus the direct signal coming to the antenna, they get to a point where there's a null. Sometimes there's a null. A null is where the two waves meet out of phase.
Yeah.
So it's like -1 plus +1 equals 0. So that's what happens. And when it gets to 0, you have no signal. And that's when your dropout happens.
So basically one of your antennas will be in that null.
Yeah.
And the other
when
one
that
potentially
antenna
won't.
Yeah. So when that antenna is in a null, the system now tells itself to go to the antenna that's seeing the signal. And that's how diversity works. But at the same time, it's two independent antennas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're on a system and you see complete dropout on one leg, and it switches to the other leg, you know, because I mean, I know like on the ULXDs, you've got your 2 yellow lines, and then you've got your blue dots, which means it's proper lock.
It's locked on.
And when the one blue dot goes, it's pretty much because of a null that's coming across.
Yes. Or the information that it's getting has got some noise, or it's
it's not happy.
So what happens is, what works most of the time is you leave the antenna that's seeing the most signal where it is, and you can move that other antenna about 0.5 meter to the opposite side, and that usually helps, because then you move it out of the place where it can't see any signal, or it's struggling to see a signal, and you move it into a better position where it can see effective signal.
But now, okay, having said that, if we're on, so for example, according to your picture here, you've got a unit with 2 fixed antennas. It's in a, say for example, on panel mount on the rack, you've got the 2 connected antennas. And now you're saying the one's in a null. If I move that one, I'm moving the other one into the null. So how do I Do I just move the whole box? You know, because I don't
Yes.
have a distributor or
So
loose
you,
antennas
yeah,
yet.
you don't have external antennas.
Could
So,
potentially say, for example, I'm sitting with 12 and 3. Could doing
mhm.
that switch the null or fix it, or is that not enough movement? Or just repositioning? Because I've seen guys doing this as well, where you've got some dropout, you just sort of move the paddle, or you move the stubby, thinking you're going to fix the problem.
Um, Doing that, it might help a bit, but not tilting it to the front, because then you are facing the now part of the antenna towards the performance area. So better
So
maybe try
sideways.
and at a 45-degree angle. If that doesn't work, just try and move
Because I mean, if you take one
the
of your
units.
typical setups, if you're doing a corporate, you've got a front of house
Yeah,
booth, you know, it's
yeah.
only 2 or 3 mics because
There's
of
no space.
MCs on stage, it's all set up.
Yeah,
I can't move this thing now, and it's fixed
yeah.
antenna, so the only thing I can do is fiddle with the stubbies. So
Yes,
as long as I make sure that the side on stays
yeah,
towards the expected
yes,
transmission
yeah,
orientation point, then
yeah.
moving sideways this way, basically. Not, don't, because if your unit's sitting here and you just do that, you actually putting yourself into
And
into a worse spot.
yeah, that's suicide.
Yeah.
So what again happens is guys put those. There's a lot of guys that put those units at front of house, and it works perfectly during rehearsal. And people come in, and now there's dropouts every 5 seconds. Um, what happens is that energy, all of that energy is being absorbed by the human body
Yeah.
because we've got salt water in our bodies. Um, so that absorbs RF energy. And if you think about it, it's not one body. If you've got a venue and there's 300 people in front of your microphones, I mean that's 300 people
Yeah,
absorbing.
basically you lose your line of sight because technically those transmitters
Yeah,
are normally on tabletops or
yeah,
something. So
yeah. As soon
you
as you stand in
physically
front of it, it's
exactly.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the obviously height is obviously also gonna be your friend with any antenna system. So whatever the antenna can't see, it means the receiver can't see.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've got a question here, which I think goes directly because we're still talking about stubby. So Sean King sent a question saying, if you've got a rack of 6 Sennheiser EW100 lapels receivers with the Omni antennas, so the Zennies are the short little quarter waves.
Yeah.
What would be don't have a antenna combiner or distro?
Mm.
What's the best way to mount those 12 antennas? Because now if you think
What's
about it, if you rack mount them, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units in a very small space.
yeah.
Where do I put the 12 antennas?
If it's a unit like that, I mean, you you have your backstage area. If you have those, and if you have space to put them enough um, spaces apart, just to minimize the antennas talking to each other.
Okay,
So
but now
if you space,
explain that because now you're talking about antennas,
so
which are receivers. So how are they talking to each other?
so obviously the antennas work on electromagnetic energy, and that electromagnetic energy is in the air. It's coming from electronics. So all electronics, wherever there's a current, there's electromagnetic energy leaving that current. So if you're gonna mount all of them and pile them up together on as a pile, then you've got that heat, the heat that's gonna build up, and that's obviously more energy leaving, and that's noise coming into your antenna systems of each of those devices. So what I've done is maybe take two, put them this side, take two in the center, take two
On the right.
and then put them in a row, and yeah. But maintain line of sight. If you know there's gonna be people or any obstructions, make sure that the antennas can see the stage.
But now
and there should be no.
Let's, if we take Sean's question, if you're working for a company and they've rack mounted 6-unit in a single flight case, you get to site, you don't have time to strip the case apart or anything like that.
Yeah.
Could you not extend the antennas themselves off the panel just with some BNC?
You would need a chassis ground plane for those. So you can do it, but it has to be on a ground plane.
So if you take a stubby and you put it on a 5-meter cable, just with a barrel, just the stubby by itself, you're basically negating the antenna almost, because you don't have a ground plane.
So if you take the stubbies, you've got the short ones, which is the quarter wave. It sees a quarter of your wavelength. And you've got the longer ones, which are the half wave antennas. That sees half of the wavelength, which is effective to get the signal that the receiver needs. You can mount a quarter wave on a ground plane, like a metal piece, as long as there's a ground plane. And that other one, the half wave, you can mount up as is, but is also advisable for you to get a ground plane.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially,
theoretically, the half wave should work. It's supposed to work.
Yeah.
As is.
But best practice would be, obviously, when you start talking about multiple mics, more than 2 or 3 in a rack, you would want to combine it to minimize the amount of antennas you need. And also then you can go to an active antenna, which would be a directional antenna or something like that.
Yeah, but if you have the luxury to use a passive antenna, use it. The reason I'm saying that is, I know we almost everyone uses active antennas or with microphones. But what happens is those amplifiers also add noise to the system, because you've got all of that circuitry that's being powered up. You're getting signal coming into your antenna. It goes into all of that circuitry, and then it goes through your cable, and then so before it gets to the actual receiver, it's gone through a certain part of it.
So it's added a bit of noise. So you lose a little bit of your headroom basically on your potential pickup.
Yeah, even if you have it, I mean, if you'd have a bit more noise than you'd have with a passive antenna.
Okay,
so but it still works. Yeah.
There's a question here from Paul. We're still on the flight case and the stubbies. But most flight cases have got aluminium or metal rims or something. So if you think about a flight case where you've opened the lid, but the edge of the flight case sits there and your stubby touches that aluminium, does that affect the signal or the effectiveness of the stubby?
No, it doesn't.
Not at all.
No.
And I've seen guys, I asked you this question the other day as well, where they have mobile antennas and they go and cable tie them to a truss. Like to the side of a truss.
Yeah. I think you've seen me do that, but what happens is when I do that, I put some insulation between the truss plate, the trussing, and the actual antenna, what do you call it? Mic stand boom. So we do that to get height on the antenna so that it sees the signal effectively. But obviously, if you've got electronics or whatever mounted on the truss, that means there might be some energy on the truss, and you're transferring it into your system. So that could be adding noise to your antenna.
But I mean, it's a good rule of thumb to stay away from any metal structure with your antenna.
Not to, yeah, it's good practice not to obstruct the view of the sorry, my notice. It's good practice not to obstruct your view with any human bodies or with metal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the human
So
body,
what
the human
happens
bodies is a tricky one because your artist is a human body, and we're
exactly?
coming from backstage and they're facing the crowd, so they're already in between the two. But that singular
Yes.
body is not necessarily the biggest obstruction.
No, it's not.
Okay.
So what if you I've seen also guys also put the antennas behind a truss. So what happens is when a wave leaves the microphone and comes towards the antenna, those gaps in the truss are not big enough for the wave to come through. So you actually affect degrading your signal that's coming into your system.
Okay.
And
So,
yeah.
so Sean's asking another question now, which takes us to cabling.
Hmm.
On a passive system, what is the maximum length you can run a cable? So answer that, but also be specific to the cable type.
Okay. So we've got when it comes to our wireless systems, we've got 50 ohm. I'll say that again, 50 ohm coaxial cable. We've got RG58. RG, by the way, means radio guide. RG58, which is the thin cable, the standard cable that comes with your microphone system.
Mm-hmm.
You've got LMR 195, which is the one with um, the solid copper strand in the middle. And then you've got RG213, and then you've got LMR 400. Um, so RG58, once you can use it for your short links when
Okay.
you're linking your systems, and then you can use it on your external antennas. So RG58 is quite effective um, until you reach about 10 meters. And then after 10 meters, you start getting um, attenuation.
Okay.
Yeah. And then once you go 15 meters and above, it is advisable you it is advisable to use RG213.
The
Reason
thicker
being
one.
the thicker ones. RG213's got more copper strands inside. So when you open up an RG213 cable and a RG58, RG58 has one copper strand. RG213 has got I think it's 6 or 7 copper strands inside. So that means you've got less chance of signal attenuation or yeah,
Mm.
when you're using RG213. You
So
still get
if you grab, which a lot of companies have got piles and piles and piles and piles of SDI cable, which is 75 ohm.
yes.
What is the
Um
effect of that? You know, because you're suddenly running out of cables, or one of your cables is damaged, and you grab a 20-meter
yeah,
SDI cable. You know, it's a good quality cable. You can't moan. It's an SDI cable.
yeah. So SDI was actually created to pass large files for like video actually and all of that. And RG58 was designed for RF. Um, so what happens is when you plug in a 75 ohm cable, when you plug in a 75 ohm cable, you are actually losing or wasting signal. So you get a lot more attenuation um, because your receiver is 50 ohms, your antenna is 50 ohms, now your cable is 75 ohms. So what happens is from your microphone, the signal comes to your antenna. When it gets to your antenna, it goes through the 75 ohm cable to your receiver. So what happens is the signal that doesn't get into the system because the capacity the
Bandwidth.
the ohmage is not the same.
Okay.
It has nowhere to go. So not all of the signal goes into the system. So what happens is that signal is now reflected backwards
In the cable.
into the cable. Yeah.
So and you can actually start having modulation
You
in
can,
the cable.
yeah. So it also affects your your sine wave. It can affect it constructively or destructively.
But
Because
and
you've
this
got,
is regardless of the length now. This is not. Some
yes,
guys go, well,
because
it's only 2 meters. It's fine.
yes, it's regardless. You have to have the same impedance.
Okay.
That's the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. You you have to have the same impedance from your antenna to your cable, to your connector, and your receiver system.
Yeah.
That's how you get good signal going through.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when you see the little patch links that come with a lot of these systems, they're half meter or 300 mil long,
Yeah,
RG58, they look flimsy. So my SDI,
yeah,
obviously this is a much better cable, it's not going to be an issue, but they don't take into
yeah,
consideration the impedance. And I think that's an
yeah,
important lesson for everybody just to take note of across the whole spectrum of RF. Your components need to talk the same language, you need to be in the same,
yeah,
you need to play with the right tools,
yeah,
because one element can have a massive impact. You
yeah,
can go buy a helical antenna and spend a lot of money on it, but you put the wrong cable on it, or even, you know, so answer me this one. On your 50 ohm cable, it's not long enough, so I grab a barrel and I extend it. Have I lost signal? Is there quality of the
yes.
barrel?
I've
Does that make a difference? Are there different types of barrels?
you you actually so for each join that you do, you are losing. There's attenuation, so you're losing signal. So I've actually um, gone on two or three shows where guys have set up and they're happy, and I get a last minute call and the system is going crazy. Um, and it was fine during rehearsal. Um, our systems have these tendencies of just misbehaving when they see the public. So when
Yeah.
people walk in, it just misbehaves, and I get there and there's I'm actually cringing thinking about this. There's joins or barrels joining cables to make the cable longer. And so the signal that was getting to the receiver compared to signal that was getting to the antenna from the microphone was halved, if not.
So you're almost better not extending your antenna and just taking it as far as
So
that cable can go.
yeah, if you need a longer cable, get a longer cable.
Mm.
Don't join cables.
So
So
what is the recommendation in terms of length? Because that was Sean's question. How long can I make a? Oh,
okay,
you answered that already. 10 meters on a
yeah.
RG58.
So let's look at a 30-meter cable. Um, when you have a RG58 cable, and you go 30 meters with that into your antenna, you lose about, I'll take a wild guess, about 5 to 7 dBs, and with the RG58 cable. And when you connect an RG213 cable, you lose about 1.5
Okay,
dBs.
yeah, it's quite significant. Yeah.
So that's a significant amount of
Mm.
energy that you're saving
Okay.
from using
So we
RG213.
so we should have, and I think I've asked you for us as well to make us up a nice bunch of cables, because your
Yes.
standard configurations, 5 or 6 meters off a rack is enough. But when we do the bigger shows, and one of the things that MJ does when you book him, he arrives with, I think he's got a Pantec outside just full of cable. He knows what gear we've got, and he often won't even use our cabling. He'll run his own cables out and add to the situation, because obviously everything he just said now to maintain the best possible signal. Just pull your mic out again. You're too skinny.
Can I quickly do this so that it doesn't happen again?
Okay.
To be neat, but
no, it's fine.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, I need a barber. I'm far from being neat.
I'm almost there.
I think barber shops need to be the first thing that opens. Don't go there. So let's move on now away from the stubbies. If we start talking about different antennas, is on a small corporate, so we say we take a room at Summer Place or SEC or somewhere where it's 150 people and all that. If my receivers are on stage, in other words, line of sight, am I better off using a paddle than a stubby automatically?
It depends.
Okay, explain.
It depends on the set. So a stubby is omnidirectional. Also, let me say this first. You have to be far enough from your antenna system with your microphone. So you can't have too little signal. You can't have too much signal, because when you have too much signal, it overloads.
So if there's a podium and I put the receiver underneath the podium, I'm not doing myself any favors.
That's more suicide. So
okay.
So you can use stubbies when you are, say your receivers are backstage or on the side of stage. You can use your stubbies, but it depends on your surroundings. It depends on if there's anything that would cause noise in your system. So when we talk about cardioid pattern antenna, your shark fin or your...
I'm going to put that on quickly. So there's I've got a picture of your Sennheisers and your Shures.
The log periodic antenna. So if you take that shark fin antenna, the part of it where the cable is connected at the back there, that's the least sensitive part of the antenna. So that means whatever signal is coming from behind, the system will still see it, but it won't see it as much as if you are using an omnidirectional antenna. So it will be attenuated. But where the antenna is facing, the system will see that just as good as when you're using an omnidirectional antenna.
Okay, so here's a quick question just on our connectors. Richard Newton saying he's heard that a 75 ohm connector can damage your 50 ohm ports.
Can damage them?
Well, look, a 75 ohm cable, BNC, and a RG58 BNC, the BNCs themselves, the pins are still the same.
It's still the same. It's still the same thing. It's just the 50 ohm has a dielectric coating in between. So if you look at a 75 ohm cable, 75 ohm connector and a 50 ohm connector. A 50 ohm connector has that white lining inside. That's a dielectric. What it helps with is shielding, so that it what do you call it, protects your signal from noise, from high frequency noise. When you look at a 75 ohm connector, it doesn't have it. So that's how you see the difference between the two. But damaging a port, I don't think that would happen. what I would say is it's wasting signal. So signal that goes in is doesn't all go in because the impedance isn't the same.
Yeah.
So the signal that doesn't go in needs to go somewhere, and it can't just disappear.
So
So
yeah,
it
I've
moves.
got a
Yeah.
question on that connector thing now. If you look at the picture you sent me with the shark fins, doesn't it drive you
Hmm.
crazy that all the connectors are orientated horizontally and our cables have to come
Yes.
down to earth? Is there a
Yeah,
reason they're
it
doing
does.
that, or are they just out to make us fix cables the whole time?
Uh, it's there could be a reason why they do that. So when you look at your antennas, when you look at the passive antennas, the connector is at a it's straight.
So it's
When you
straight
look,
in line with the copper. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and then when you look at an active antenna, it's actually it goes down like that.
because you've got the circuitry there.
You've got the circuitry there, so it's a design thing, and it they don't do it just to give you a hard time. It fits in with the design.
Yeah.
So how I overcome that, I think I might have sent you that picture with the
Oh yes, you
RG213
did. Yeah.
cable.
Let me
Yeah.
put that on quickly.
So
Yes.
how I how I overcome that is I'm actually when I sell a cable to a client, I'll just ask them what type of connector they want, a right angle one or a straight one. So on a passive antenna where you've got your connector straight like that, you can just use a right
For it to
angle
come straight
cable
down.
and
Yeah.
then yeah,
Yeah, because that drives
and
me
that
mad.
I know it's yeah.
Okay.
Um, so
Yeah. So we were
that's
busy talking about cardioid antennas. Um,
yes.
so what is best practice for cardioid? Because now all of a sudden you've got
Hmm.
two antennas, you've got a distributor. Distributors or a combiner in this case, if we're talking about microphone pickups,
Mm.
combines all the signals and puts them to multiple receivers.
Hmm.
But I've got say two 20-meter cables and two paddles. So do I move them as far apart from each other as possible? In other words, one left stage and one right stage.
You
Would
mean
that help the
you
two shark fins
that
of a
yeah that would
diversity
help.
system?
Yeah, what I usually do is put them about 3 meters apart. Um, and depending on the performance, I'll move the one that's got the least performance.
Okay, so
Um,
let me follow up my own question then. So with my two shark fins,
yeah.
being
So you.
diversity and with a null,
Mm-hmm.
if I have them like you were saying with paddles, if I have them about a half a meter apart, or I have them 5 meters apart,
Mm-hmm.
is there a significant distance or a benefit to that? If it's say for example a static performance area.
There is there is in a sense that when one antenna fails, the other one needs to be in a better position. So if if the antennas are half a meter apart, there's a big possibility that they're in the same null area.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you take them uh, about 2.5 meters or 3 meters apart, which is about half of the wavelength of the sine wave that you're getting from the microphone,
Mm.
um, you still stand a better chance of getting good signal on both on your system,
Okay.
on your receiver
And
system. Yeah.
and the other way around now, I've only got one mic stand left, so I put both of them on my one mic stand, one above the other one. Do they is intermodulation on that kind of antenna more of a problem when they're that close to each other?
You mean on one mic stand, one at the top, one at the bottom?
Yeah. So just I'm saving space.
I I don't.
I'm talking about things that I've
So
seen, and you guys are
yeah,
when you're rushing and you're setting up, and it's
yeah.
only two
So
microphones, so it's not an issue. That's
yeah.
the
So if
mindset.
you so if you think about it, when you have both antennas on the same mic stand in the same spot, and a null happens on one antenna, and that other antenna is right under the antenna that's got the null, there's a big possibility that both antennas are in this. Well, they're basically in the same spot.
Mm.
Obviously not height-wise,
That's
but
on the null part. Say, for example, they're not in a null. Are they affecting each other?
no, it's they far apart, far
Yeah.
apart
So there
enough.
is. So
Yeah,
we need to stay at least a half a meter or a meter away from each other.
yeah. I
Then
haven't.
I'm
Mm,
going to follow up that question. I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at you, so you must just.
mm,
So say, for example, I've got an artist. I've got one artist. He's running a
yeah.
microphone and he's got an in-ear pack. So
Mm-hmm,
I've got a shark fin on my mic, and
mm-hmm.
I've got a transmitter on my IEM. So
Okay,
now I'm
okay.
sending and I'm receiving. So technically, the two antenna or the two shark fins are
They're right
doing
next to
two
each other.
different things. Surely they can't be
Don't
bugging each other.
They are gonna bug each other because one antenna is sending information, the other antenna is receiving information. So you're gonna have a masking effect on your receiving side, on your receiving antenna.
Okay.
So your in-ear transmitter going to your artist's belt pack is getting signal from the transmitting antenna. So that antenna it's got a 10 milliwatt or 50 milliwatt um,
Output.
power output on it. And imagine that's blasting into an antenna that's got 10 milliwatts coming in from a microphone.
But there are different frequencies.
It's it's energy. That's yeah.
So it's
So
white.
what's
It's
gonna
white.
happen?
It's noise. It's white noise.
Yeah. So it's
On the
gonna
RF side. Yeah.
exactly. It's like when me and you. I did the same example with Richard. When me and you are sitting and talking like this, and then a group of people come and sit behind you and start talking loud, and you won't be able to hear me as much as you did when there was no one behind you. So if we move away and sit at another table where there's no one making noise there, you're going to be able to hear me.
With
uh,
the same amount of
that
energy. Yeah.
exactly. So what I usually do is I put the receive antennas behind the transmit antennas, um, about a meter or two apart. So what happens is the transmitting energy leaves first, and the part that's facing my receive antennas
Is in the null.
is, yeah, that's the least effective part of the antenna that's facing my receive antennas. So my receive antennas will be seeing the microphone energy that's supposed to be coming to it more than it's seeing the noise from the in-ears.
Okay. So here's another one then. Solo artist again.
Oh,
He-
what can I?
yeah.
Okay,
Finish.
sure.
No, no, go.
Also, um, you've got no, I'll leave that to after I answer this question. You
Okay.
can, you can,
So
yes, sir.
the same system, transmitter and
Mm-hmm,
receiver, but we don't have
mm-hmm.
paddles. We've only got stubbies. And I've just spent a nice amount of money, and I've bought myself a ULX D and a PSM 900, and I've racked them in the same rack. So I've got two stubbies for my mic, and I've
And
got
you,
a stubby
yeah,
for my transmitter, all in the space of a
in the same
2U
rack.
rack. What's happening there?
Uh, it's the same analogy I just used. So I've been in a situation like that, and the artist wasn't happy, but I took the in-ear transmitter out and I spaced it, physically spaced it apart from the microphone receiver,
Mm.
um, because it just this it's the system is just seeing cleaner signal. The microphone system is seeing cleaner signal that way.
Yeah, because I mean I've
Yeah,
seen that sold like that as well. Where it gets racked
yeah,
like that. But it's
yeah,
yeah, the best would be to get either a shark fin on the antenna, the receiver, or the transmitter and get it
yeah.
away.
I mean, yeah, it's better if you take if you get a transmitter and you get a passive antenna, you can leave them in the same rack, but just have an external antenna
Move it away.
for your in-ear,
Yeah.
and move it away. That also works.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean it's practical things and it's little things, but I don't think everybody always, we're so busy with a bunch of stuff that that little issue only becomes an issue when it's an issue, and then it's a
when
big
it
issue,
happens.
and it's too late because the artist is on stage or you're in performance. So you need, if you've got these things in your head, you can anticipate. It's always like, it's one of those things. If you can answer the questions people don't know to ask, you're going to win the fight. So if you get to a scenario and if you're working for a company who's doing full turnkey solutions, so they're going to put LED up, they're going to put staging up, they're going to do PA, they're going to do everything. You've got as an audio tech, if you're multitasking because it's a small gig, your ability to place and plan where to place your RF, before you get to site, and decide, am I going to come right with stubbies, or am I going to come right with the paddle, depending on what the set looks like or the venue that I'm going to. If you go to these days, if you're on one of the award sets, for example, you've got, it's pretty much just big kitchens. You've got flat surfaces everywhere. It's reflections everywhere. Your performance area is right out front. You've got cladding and the reflections is so bad. And then in between that, there's 200 panels of LED. So what is the LED doing to us? I want to bring to that question now. So on a set where there's two TX screens or a fixed screen in the back and there's lots of LED up, what is that contributing to our scenario?
Okay. So when you look at a LED screen, you've got the power supply at the back of each panel. Now imagine you've got 200 panels all joined up together, and all of those 200 panels have a power supply, and each time that LED light at the back flickers, it's releasing energy. That energy is seen as noise when it comes to our system. So the closer you are to the screen, the more noise your system sees. So it comes to a point where your signal to noise ratio, meaning the signal that your receiver is supposed to see, is being drowned in that noise. So when that happens, that's when you start hearing that swishing noise that you get, because your signal is actually drowning in noise.
So a LED panel, that LED, obviously it's all around the panel.
It's not frequency dependent.
It's just noise. It's like Starship Enterprise, shields up, nothing gets through. So you don't want your paddle behind the screen and your transmitter on the other side of the screen. That's like the worst case scenario, because there's nothing coming through or being transmitted through that. So you need to then, if we take, for example, and it's a classic thing that happens so often now, where the set's been so beautifully designed that if I come around a corner with a pedal to try and get to my artist, I'm the first guy being screamed at, because get that thing off the stage. So what do we do?
Yeah. Even because I've been through that even on TV productions.
So you've got some toys to get around that. That's what I'm pushing you towards.
So I've actually gone to a lady's shop once, and I got a few weird looks when I looked for leggings, because I was using helical antennas on a certain TV show. I think it was The Voice. So I had to run out, get leggings, because the camera guys were seeing the antennas in the shot.
The
helical antenna.
Yeah.
So
put that on the screen quickly.
So you see how that antenna is. Every time a light flashes on it, it would reflect and show on the camera. So I had to go and buy leggings and cut them in half and then dress the antennas up. So
to hide them in the black,
To hide them in the black. So I did that because there's LED in the set. that LED is emitting noise. So I had to move my antennas away from the LED. Um, so I know it's a big problem, especially when it comes to corporates, because you've got this nice flat look. The flat is beautiful, and then you just come and plonk
Stick
your
a shark
antenna
fin
there.
in now.
Yeah, the client doesn't like that. So
That
it
that's
doesn't it
that's a
doesn't.
that's a big reason why a lot of guys end up with their RF at front of house.
Yes.
But then
Um,
ideally then go to shark fins, get height so that you can.
yes. And
So
and again, I think it's a matter of also educating the client. I mean, if the client your client won't know that if your receiver doesn't see the mic, it's not gonna work. Your client knows that your microphone is wireless,
yeah, but
but
some
how that
clients will go,
system
well, that
gets
don't
there,
make your problem mine, you know.
yeah. Well, in that case, then get external antennas.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
and the reason I just brought up that thing where a lot of guys then go to front of house
yeah,
is there, what's the distance factor? So if I have, I've got proper active antennas and I'm
hmm,
shooting across a floor, I've got clear line of sight. There's no issue with any obstruction, no lead, no nothing. How
yeah.
far will I get? So say for example I'm working with
That's
with an Axient, proper
yeah,
microphone, high quality, or the new 9000 Zenis or
yeah.
something. Does
Uh,
the quality of the antenna make a difference to how far the transmitter gets?
that the quality of the components in your system plays a role. So the more expensive microphones, obviously, the filters are much better. So it eliminates more, or it ignores more of the noise, and it sees the signal better. But in terms of how far how far does can I go with the microphone, you have to actually test it out. Because you can't just say you can go 100 meters, because there's a lot that happens in the air when that sine wave leaves the microphone.
Mm.
It gets absorbed. There's noise in the air. There's reflections off the wall. It hits the wall, and the amplitude goes down. Um, so you can put your antennas up, have clear line of sight, but you have to do a test.
So, I mean, the classic example of that is if you think cricket. You get your stump mics
Yeah,
in the middle, you've got a little receiver, you see the little
yeah,
quarter wave sticking out of if they
yeah.
zoom in, you see it behind there, but it's clean line of sight. Your antenna is
It's
just off
clean line
out the
of sight.
boundary. So you're talking about
Yeah,
60, 70 meters in those cases, but it's
yeah.
a fixed
So
point.
if
It's
you,
not moving around, which means
yeah,
you literally can find your sweet spot with the antenna, stick it down,
yeah.
and you're
So
set.
again, if you look at the difference, cricket is played outdoors, and most conferences are held indoors. So when you're outdoors, if you're lucky enough, you don't get as much reflective surfaces um, as you are indoors. So obviously outside you've got cars, you've got buildings, you've got all of that, but there's more open space,
Mm,
if you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah. I'm seeing, yeah, and you made mention to it, so I'm bringing this question in now. Sean's asking a question.
Hmm.
Well, two questions. One of them quickly, which I think it's become less of an issue because it's more automatic and digital. But so your system is managing it, and you were just talking about the noise and the filtering. The
Yeah.
question is, what is squelch?
Squelch is, so the best way I can describe squelch is the gate on your mixer. So squelch is circuitry closes until it gets the desired signal at the desired level, and then it opens up to your audio path.
Yeah.
It opens up the audio path on your receiver that goes to. So a lot of the times, I'll make an example. You'll see the orange signal on your receiver, but there's no sound coming out at the desk. That's because the squelch circuitry is closed, but the receiver is showing you that it's seeing signal from somewhere.
So it's a noise signal instead of a signal. So, and
Yeah.
the way I always explain it as well is, if you think about your old school car radios, when you lose the station, you get the white noise, and you would turn, you get the signal. These days, if you lose the station, it breaks up and then it's gone, because the modern radios mute. So if you look at, I'm going to switch that one picture on again where your scan is. I'm going to put on your actual active scan picture that you sent.
Yeah.
Which is this one. So it's that the shot with your whole scan. So that green that you guys see on the screen there, that's the noise floor, and then all the little spikes are actual frequencies that are sticking out, and there'll be an average of the noise floor, and your signal needs to break through that. If you have a microphone that's set to a frequency and your squelch, and there's no squelch, if you lose the mic, that noise is what's going to come through. That'll break through, and it'll be a lot of white noise. It'll be noise.
Yeah.
So on some of the older systems, I can remember many times in the 90s having to go to back of a receiver, and the squelch would actually be an adjustable tweaker, and I would
You'd need a screwdriver.
and I would have a mic that would drop out just in a certain spot, but it's enough signal, and I would go and I would reduce the squelch to let a little bit more signal in, and then I would my dropout wouldn't happen. But then at the end of a session, you would switch that mic off, and then there'd be noise that comes through. You know, so you take that chance where either if you lose the mic or you switch the mic off, you know. So a lot of that happens automatically. You still have a squelch setting on all your devices. These days it's digital, where you can set the sensitivity of your squelch to give yourself a little bit more range.
Yeah, and also you've got what you call pilot tone. So what happens is you get, when you switch on your microphone, and so a lot of you should have noticed that when you switch off your mic on your microphone, your signal doesn't immediately show on your receiving system. So what happens is when you switch your microphone on, your microphone sends a pilot tone to the receiver and tells it I'm on, and then your signal comes up. So that's a good thing that the guys did there.
Yeah, I mean, we often see this with the guys with shout mics. You know, they switch the microphones on and off to save
and they
battery.
talk immediately.
But they switch on and talk, and wait a sec, and then it's there again. You know, they got to just get used to switch it on, wait 2 seconds, talk.
Yes.
And it's just the system basically getting itself together. The pilot tone is just it's a ID tag. That's also why you wouldn't find, and I've had this question often, I'm sure you've had it, you know, if I've got a Shure that's on 898 frequency, and I take a Sennheiser and I switch it to the same frequency, why don't I hear it on the Shure?
Yeah, it's a pilot tone thing.
Yeah, it's an ID. It's an ID tag. You know, the one system will ignore the other one because although it's on the same frequency, it might be interfering with this Shure one because it's fighting. But it's not going to
overload. Yeah, you'll get an overload because there's too much energy going into the receiving system, but you won't hear both mics at the same time. Yeah, so you might still hear the show, but there's going to be lots of dropout because its system is dealing with both frequencies coming into.
We just had a question, can MJ explain pilot tone, which we just did. So there we go, Paul. A comment here from Aiden saying, you know, one of the problems with a distro like a 844 is if you lose your power supply, you lose 4 receivers. You know, if you've got a distribution unit and you put your pedals on and you lose your power supply on the distro, which in a lot of cases also supply the power to the units, but your whole system goes down.
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you've got a single unit and you lose your power there, then your whole system is gone.
Yeah.
So
I think we tend to do this as much as we can now, having extra receivers or extra transmitters in a rack that aren't doing anything, especially on the you know, once you starting to with like 12 vocals and this, you always have extra units there because you could have a transmitter that goes, you could have a belt pack that goes, and instead of retuning, you just have a spare allocated system that you've already tested and calibrated, and you can just hand it out, and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, electronics is electronics. When things break, they break. If we all had the luxury of having redundancy in everything, I mean, we make sure these days, and we've been doing it now for probably the last 5-6 years. We've got UPSs on as many of our electronic devices as possible. Our UPSs in our monitor system will run monitor land as much as possible, or a second UPS depending on how big monitor land gets. Same thing at front of house. As many of your devices you can, stick them on the UPS. It's twofold, because the good UPSs are doing, they're stabilizing your signal, making sure you don't get spikes through, because that's what takes power supplies. Even these little power supplies, they're cool, but they're fragile. If you get any kind of spike, if you're running on Jenny or anything like that, it can damage stuff. So try and be as preemptive as you can. At the cost of people go, but UPS is too expensive. They're not actually. If you work out your cost, the amount of money you save in a very short space of time by getting a couple of 2K UPSs, rack mount units, they're not as expensive as people think. I mean, DWR are selling them, a couple of places are selling them, and they're selling good quality ones, and they work. They add weight. Your cases get heavier, but they work.
Yeah. If you look in the long run of how many microphones are you going to replace because of spikes, that also comes into play. Can I just go back to transmitting and receiving frequencies again? The same principle works. The physical spacing works. Can you put on that scan again that I sent you?
The works when green scan.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on now.
So when I do my calculations, I physically space apart my transmit frequencies and my receive frequencies, because
just to explain the picture, those white lines, which are your tag points, those are frequencies that you've allocated.
That I've allocated, and I think that was actually one of SunGP's shows. All of those other spikes, that was quite a busy venue when we went there. Those are other things. I think some of them are also walkie-talkies. So what happens is frequencies in the air also interact. So when you've got your microphones and your in-ear monitors in the same band, and they're not spaced apart physically, it becomes an issue where there's going to be intermodulation again. So your microphones are now going to be interfacing. No, I'm using wrong English. They're going to be interacting with your microphones will be interacting with your in-ear transmit frequencies, and those are going to make intermodulation products.
So I think you made this example. A good example of that is the guitarists. Where they got the belt, and they put the pack on the belt pack, and they put the in-ear on the same belt pack, or the belt pack is on the belt, or the in-ears, but the guitar one is like literally next to it.
Oh, that's a masking thing. So your in-ear pack, the filtering system on the receiver on the in-ear pack is not as effective as the one on a microphone system. Obviously, because it's being powered by a battery.
And it's not diversity.
You don't have as much of a strong signal coming to it as you have on a microphone receiving unit.
Okay, well, I said you don't have diversity. Look, on thousands, you do have diversity.
On thousands, you do, yeah. And I mean, there's ones that have come out with other brands that are quite good, even though they don't have the two antennas. It's a filtration thing. It's a filter thing, where your pack actually ignores is able to cut out more noise that's coming in.
And
So,
keep the quality of the
and keep
signal.
the quality of the audio. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the more money you pay for your systems, the better build you get to go on to shows with. Yeah. So with the signal part, they interact and they make harmonics in the frequency spectrum. And again, the physical products, the microphone on the guitar and the in-ear pack, that's a masking thing, where your microphone, your guitar pack is gonna be masking your in-ear antenna,
Okay.
so it won't see effective signal. Yeah,
Unless you separate them.
unless you physically separate them.
I think we haven't had a new
Yeah.
question for a bit. I think we've answered all the questions.
Yeah.
Anything you want to still add? I mean, we've been going for about an hour and a bit now. Anything
I mean,
you feel that you
so
want to contribute still?
yeah.
I mean, you're
So
contributing all the time, but you know what I mean.
yeah. So setting up is so try and be. I know a lot of us we check out things on the internet and it looks cool, and if you don't know why something is being done and you see it on the internet, don't do it until you've tested it. Don't do it on the show until you've tested it and you know why it's being set up like that. Um, and just be sure of your setup, double check, do your scan. We've got scanners on our receivers now. Do your scan, calculate as much as you can, and after doing the whole setup, don't stop testing until the show starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even when the show starts, keep an eye on your receivers because, like anything can happen.
So here's a question from that perspective, and this is a rule we have. We'll to save batteries. Obviously, we switch on and off. But once the show starts, we take all transmitting devices and switch them on and lock them on, so that we occupy the space. And we know from our perspective we're not introducing anything additional, which means we could potentially sometimes have a lot of unutilized transmitters going. So
just sitting there. Yeah.
So explain this picture now. Put up the bread tins.
So what happens is metal is a reflective surface. So when you put a transmitter in there, you get all sorts of phasing and there's cancellation within that metal tray. So that those tin cans, besides making your setup look neat, they actually reduce the energy that's among your microphones, so that you don't get intermodulation distortion products.
Yeah. So what can happen, and I think go back to what we said right in the beginning. If I have 10 microphones and there's 2 artists on the stage, so 8 microphones are lying backstage. We've locked them on because we don't want to be switching on and off. They're right next to each other. They're all transmitting, and because they're so close to each other physically, you start having a lot of intermodulation and harmonics that are being spit out, and then interfering with the mics that are in use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when they interact, they make harmonics, and if one of the harmonics lands on the microphone that's on stage, that's gonna be there's gonna be a very unhappy client.
So by putting them in the bread tins, we basically, they're all still on, they're all still transmitting, but we're avoiding that intermodulation by having them separated.
Yes.
We're using the metal to basically, as if they're all, because if you think about a choir, if the people are standing 1 meter apart and they all have microphones, that 1 meter is enough. That physical spacing is enough. You know, what's it? Social spacing is enough not to cause infections. Whereas when they lie neat on a table at the back, it can cause quite a bunch of issues. So we use the tins, and like you say, it makes it look neat, but it does help in terms of just keeping the air clean.
Yeah, and again, remember the software takes that into consideration. It takes it takes into consideration if you're gonna have when you see that two t- two two T or three T on your coordination software, that T stands for transmitter. So it wants to know if you're gonna have it calculates frequencies according to when you tell it if you're gonna have two transmitters quite close to each other or not.
Okay.
Yeah, so it calculates according to that.
So basically, what it's doing is trying to predict that if those two get close to each other, the modulation that's being caused and the harmonics that's being caused, we're staying away from that potential as well.
Exactly. So the harmonics that are being caused do not land on other frequencies that have been calculated by the same system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, and having said all that, when you have a system, when you want to run 80 microphones, all of this becomes extreme. Everything gets taken
Yeah.
to the next level. The scanning, the
Yeah.
placement, the whole situation just gets pushed to
And
the max.
yeah. And monitoring the spectrum. Um, Sometimes you become less friendly to everyone else, but it's because it's that much
Yeah,
happening.
there's
Yeah,
a lot to take
there's
care
a
of.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
So besides that, there's also you've got your 80 mics and you've got people coming in, camera guys with the wireless mics. You've got
ENG teams. Yeah,
transmissions. Yeah, you've got transmission outside. You've got walkie-talkies. So there's a lot to take into consideration. One of the shows I had, I was about 158, 159 frequencies, and I still had a lot more happening besides that.
besides your stuff.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and all of those 158 channels had to be working hand in hand with each other because backstage, while the acts were on stage, there was rehearsals happening backstage because artist, each band, each artist had come with their own system.
oh, okay. So they
So
do tests and everything while the other
yeah,
act is busy on stage.
exactly. So I
Yeah,
had to calculate all 160 frequencies and give them to all of the artists, engineers, so that they punch them into the systems and all of these systems would work together.
and they don't argue with you because they know that if they
No,
listen, it works.
yeah.
And if they've
If
got
they
an
don't
issue,
listen,
they don't rescan on their side. It's your
they come
problem.
to me.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I'd give them a main frequency and a backup frequency.
yeah.
So whatever was not, there was quite strict instruction on that show when it comes to RF because they knew how much there would be. I think there was about close to 300 walkie-talkies
Sure.
in the same
Space.
venue. Yeah. So when it comes to RF, it was quite strict there. So it came to a point where if you don't listen to me, your mic is not going to be switched on because once that happens, once that those intermodulation products happen and they spread across the spectrum, there's you don't know whose mic it's gonna kill.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
We've had a question come through. It's
yeah,
an interesting one. I've done this as well. If you
mm,
have a microphone in a big venue, having two receivers tuned to the same frequency placed at two different locations,
because yeah,
will that let me just read it all the way through. In different locations in a venue help increase your reception, i.e., transmitter to multiple identical receivers. So I'll answer this one quickly. If you have multiple receivers and one transmitter, from an audio perspective, you have to bring those two receivers on onto two different channels, and you can
yeah,
only have one channel on at a time. Otherwise, you have summing.
yeah,
And if they're
yes,
both active and you have your summing and you're happy, but the one goes and your level changes and so forth and so forth. So
yeah,
I've done this where I've had in a corporate where someone uses a microphone We did this at The Voice actually, where someone used the microphone on one stage and walks to another stage. And then we have, instead of changing packs, on the other stage is another receiver tuned to the same frequency. So when they walk from one stage to the other stage, we can kill it on our side, even if we're still seeing it, but they can still use that same microphone going forward.
But the signal was going to another. It wasn't coming to the same.
Yeah, it was going to different. It was the ENG guys doing their stuff.
Yes.
But I remember years ago I did this, the Del Hayes golf shows and all that, and those long marquees, and I put 3 receivers on, I think, on the one mic, because they would be walking, and the marquee is like 150 meters long, and there's a lot of noise in the marquee. And he'd be walking from stall to stall doing interviews across the system so people can know what's in the stalls. And I was fortunate that instead of me trying to get a very intensive signal covering the whole thing, I put multiple receivers. And by the time he gets picked up on the next receiver, he's dropped off the previous one because he's too far and there's too much interference. Then it obviously helps me just cover my space. But I'm still sitting in the mixer, and every now and again I had him on 2, but I would choose the one closest to the area that he's in. So you can cover an area like that, but it's got to be strategic, and you've got to think about what it is you're trying to achieve. You can't have 2 sources on at the same time.
Yeah, I've also done that at a stadium. Before I got my distributed antenna system, I've done that at a stadium where I think there was about 5 soccer fields in one area, and the MC's microphone was supposed to work in all
areas.
All of the soccer. So they would walk to the other end, and everyone still had to hear, because he was controlling the soccer matches happening on all the fields at the same time. So I had to place another receiver at the other end, and the audio engineer would just switch. So he had to keep an eye on the MC to see where
he is.
Yeah. And and I'd be looking at the receiver.
And you know which one is on now.
Exactly.
So from an RF perspective, having 2 receivers receiving the same signal has no impact. It's more an audio. It's an audio issue for us now.
But the other way around is a big no. Don't have 2 transmitters on the same.
That's when you get the
receiver.
overload.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if there's any other questions. I've really enjoyed the chat. I'm sure you did as well.
I did, yes.
That's cool, man.
I did.
I think we'll find some more stuff to chat about it in the future. Every time we work with you, you've got more and more toys. You're like me, you've got with gas.
Yeah.
We get more toys. I want to show guys quickly this one. Just explain this quickly. What is this flat circle?
That's called RF venue spotlight. So that's actually a near field antenna. So what happens is when I've got what do you call it? When I've got an area where there's a lot of noise, so performance area where there's lots of noise, and there's nowhere else where I can place my antenna where it will ignore the noise, I will put a third antenna onto my system, and then place that antenna on stage. So it's rubber, so the artist
flat
can
on
jump.
The floor.
Yeah. It lies flat on the floor, and then it just blends in. I usually just put tape over that writing, so it just blends in with the stage. It's a blob of rubber with a coil of wire inside. So it's quite low. It's quite a low gain antenna. So
you don't
what
get
happens
overload
is
if someone's like standing right on top of it.
Yes, so it's designed for the artist to stand close to it, and your receiver system will see that microphone more than the noise, and more than the microphones that you put up in the air.
Yeah.
So it's still a clean signal at the end of the day. But obviously I have to play around with gains so that I don't overload my system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Thank you. I think that's us for now. It was a nice chat. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you making time. I know you had a movie and some popcorn to watch, but you spoke to us instead.
My popcorn's cold. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, we're going to put your information in the chat, your contact information, RF Junkies,
Yeah.
your website, so people, if they've got more questions, they can contact you.
Yeah, I don't mind.
And then I'll tell people now, we told them the other night, I've already spoken to MJ once the lockdown's done and we have some opportunity. We're going to do some actual practical workshops on this at the music room there by us. Set up some different elements, different manufacturers, different things, run scans, do's and don'ts, some practical things. We'll go through cables and all that kind of stuff. So just keep your eye out and we'll let you know when those happen, when we can schedule them. And not until then, but for now, thanks MJ, and then we'll see all you guys at the next one. Appreciate it.
Bye.